Welcome to DCF Investigations. There are places in this world where the veil between the serene and the sinister is terrifyingly thin. We often look at a landscape, a pristine lake reflecting the blue sky, or a quiet forest swaying in the summer breeze, and we see peace. We see a sanctuary. But sometimes, history stains that soil so deeply that the beauty becomes a mask for a nightmare. Today, we are traveling to the Nordic stillness of Finland. We are going back to a time of innocence, a time before the darkness of the modern world seemed to encroach on every corner of life. We are heading to the shores of Lake Bodom. It is a name that, for the people of Finland, evokes an immediate visceral reaction. It is not just a campsite. It is an open wound. It is the site of a massacre that changed a nation forever, a mystery that has clawed its way through 6 decades of silence. Police blunders, conspiracy theories, and a trial that shocked the world. 3 teenagers died there. 1 survived. And to this day, the wind moving through the birch trees at Bodom seems to whisper the same unanswered question. Who was the monster in the dark? This is the exhaustive, untold story of the Lake Bodom Murders. To truly understand the horror of June 5th, 1960, we must first immerse ourselves in the Finland of that era. The country was recovering from the ravages of World War II. By 1960, a new generation was coming of age. A generation that had not fought in the Winter War, but was reaping the benefits of peace and rebuilding. It was a time of leather jackets, greased hair, rock and roll, and motorcycles. It was a time of newfound freedom for teenagers. Among this vibrant generation were 2 young couples who decided to celebrate the start of summer with a camping trip. Let us meet the victims, for they are not just names in a file. They were children with futures that were stolen. First, there was Mila Irmeli Björklund. She was 15 years old, on the verge of womanhood, described by those who knew her as vibrant and full of life. She was dating the 18-year-old Nils Gustafsson. Nils was a mechanic, a young man who was well-liked, physically strong, and proud of his motorcycle. Then there was Anja Tuulikki-Mäki, also 15, a close friend of Mila. She was known for her shy and gentle demeanor. She was accompanied by her boyfriend, 18-year-old Seppo Antero Boisman. Seppo was an apprentice electrician, a quiet and dependable young man. These 4 friends represented the optimism of Finnish youth. On Saturday, June 4, 1960, they set out on their motorcycles. Nils and Seppo rode the bikes, with Mila and Anja riding on the back. Their destination was a small, jutting cape on the shores of Lake Bodom, near the city of Espoo, about 22 kilometers west of Helsinki. The lake is a popular destination, known for its beauty. But the spot they chose was somewhat secluded, a small headland that offered privacy. The afternoon was idyllic. Witnesses recall seeing the group arriving, their laughter echoing over the water. They set up a single tent, a canvas ridge tent held up by poles and ropes, not the sturdy nylon domes of today. This fragile shelter would become the focal point of a forensic nightmare. They spent the evening as any teenagers would. They swam in the cool waters of the lake, they fished, and they talked about their lives. There is a verified report that they visited a local kiosk to buy lemonade and chewing gum. This is where the timeline begins to darken. The man running the kiosk was named Valdemar Gillström. Remember that name, for it will return with a vengeance later in our investigation. Gillström was known in the community as a hostile, grumpy man who despised campers. He felt they were noisy and disrespectful of the land. Witnesses stated that he was particularly agitated that day, but the teenagers, caught up in the joy of their trip, likely paid him little mind. They returned to their campsite as the evening deepened. In June, Finland experiences the phenomenon of the midnight sun. The nights never truly go pitch black. Instead, a twilight gloom settles over the land, a gray purgatory between day and night. It was in this gray light that the campers settled down to sleep. The sleeping arrangements were intimate. The two girls, Mila and Anya, were in the center of the tent. The boys, Seppo and Nils, were on the outer sides. They went to sleep shortly after midnight. What happened next is a reconstruction of terror based on forensic evidence, because for 44 years, the only living witness claimed to have no memory of the event. Sometime between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., the campsite was descended upon by an entity of pure violence. The attack was unique in the annals of crime because the killer did not enter the tent. Instead, the assailant unleashed a frenzy of violence through the canvas fabric. He cut the support ropes, causing the tent to collapse on top of the trapping teenagers. Trapped within the folds of the heavy canvas, blinded and panicked, they were helpless. The killer then proceeded to stab and bludgeon the victims through the fabric. The brutality was distinct for each victim, a fact that criminal profilers would later agonize over. Seppo Boisman was stabbed and bludgeoned. His skull was fractured, and he died from his injuries. Anja Mäki was also bludgeoned and stabbed, suffering fatal wounds. But the violence inflicted upon Mila Björklund was of a different order entirely. While the others were killed with efficient brutality, Mila was the target of overkill. She was stabbed 15 times, even after she had likely already perished. She was found undressed from the waist down. Though no sexual assault was technically proven due to the limitations of 1960s forensics, this disparity in violence suggested to many that she was the primary target, the focus of the killer's rage. Nils Gustafsson, the fourth camper, was found lying on top of the collapsed tent, not inside it. He was alive but badly injured. He had sustained a concussion, a fractured jaw, and several facial bones were broken. He had also been stabbed, though his wounds were not fatal. The discovery of the bodies is a chapter of confusion that severely damaged the integrity of the investigation. Around 6 a.m., a group of bird watchers, 2 young boys, were hiking some distance away. They looked towards the cape and saw the collapsed tent. They later reported seeing a blond man walking away from the site. Crucially, they also saw what they thought was laundry hanging on a drying rack on top of the tent. It was only later realized that they were looking at the legs of Nils Gustafsson, draped over his dead friends. The boys, not realizing the horror of what they had seen, continued on their way. It wasn't until 11 a.m. that a carpenter named Risto Serene, who was jogging nearby, stumbled upon the scene. He saw the devastation. He saw Nils moving slightly, groaning in pain. Serene immediately alerted the police. And this is where the tragedy of the investigation begins. When the police arrived, the concept of crime scene preservation was practically non-existent compared to modern standards. It was a spectacle. Villagers, hearing the news, flocked to the scene. Police officers, overwhelmed and untrained in managing such a complex homicide, allowed the scene to be contaminated. Cigarette butts were dropped. Footprints were trampled. The tent The most crucial piece of evidence was crudely handled. In a move that would baffle modern investigators, soldiers were brought in to assist with the search for the weapon, and they reportedly marched through the woods in formation, obliterating any subtle tracks the killer might have left behind. Despite the chaos, several bizarre details emerged. The keys to the boys' motorcycles were missing, yet the motorcycles themselves were left untouched. The victim's shoes were found hidden in strange places. Nils's shoes were found approximately 500 meters away from the tent. Seppo's shoes were also found hidden. Why would a killer take the time to hide shoes? A wallet was stolen, but the money was left behind. These contradictions suggested a disorganized, perhaps psychotic offender, rather than a calculating robber. Nils Gustafsson was rushed to the hospital. He was in shock, drifting in and out of consciousness. When he finally was able to speak, his story was terrifyingly simple. He claimed to remember nothing of the attack itself. His last memory was going to sleep. However, under hypnosis, a technique that was popular but scientifically dubious at the time, he recalled a pair of glowing red eyes staring at him. He described a dark figure. This testimony, induced under a trance, further fueled the public's fear. The hunt for the killer gripped the nation. It was the end of Finnish innocence. Parents stopped letting their children play outside. The image of the collapsed tent became a symbol of national trauma. Over the years, the police followed thousands of leads, but the investigation focused on 3 primary suspects, each more compelling and disturbing than the last. We must first look at the man we mentioned earlier, Valdemar Gillström, the Kiosk Man. Gillström was the local boogeyman. He had a well-documented history of aggression towards campers. He had been known to throw rocks at cyclists and cut tent ropes as a prank to drive people away. The proximity of his kiosk to the crime scene made him an immediate person of interest. The theory against Gillström is chilling. It posits that he saw the teenagers, became enraged by their presence, and in a drunken stupor, went down to the lake to teach them a lesson. He knew the terrain. He knew how to cut the ropes. The violence matches his temper. But what makes Gillström such a haunting suspect is what happened after. His wife later confessed to friends that on the night of the murders, Valdemar had come home soaking wet and acting erratically. She claimed he buried something in the garden. However, she was too terrified of him to go to the police. Gillström drowned in Lake Bodom in 1969. It was ruled a suicide. Before his death, he reportedly confessed to a neighbor, saying, "I killed them." But in 1960, the police did not have enough hard evidence to charge him. His alibi, provided by his wife, held up at the time. It was only years later, after his death, that she recanted, stating she had lied to protect herself from his wrath. Was the killer the angry neighbor all along? Many in the community believe so. However, there is another suspect who drags his case into the realm of international intrigue. His name was Hans Assmann. Assmann was a German immigrant living near Lake Bodom. His background is a tapestry of rumors and shadows. Some claimed he was a former SS officer. Others believed he was a KGB spy. While these claims are hard to verify, his behavior on the day of the murders is a matter of record. On June 6th, the day after the bodies were found, Hans Assmann arrived at the Helsinki Surgical Hospital. He was not there for a checkup. He was delirious, drifting in and out of consciousness. But what shocked the doctors was his appearance. His fingernails were black with dirt, and his clothes were covered in red stains. When the doctors tried to examine him, he became aggressive. He feigned unconsciousness when police were near. Assmann matched the description of the blonde man seen by the bird watchers. He had long blonde hair. But curiously, shortly after the news of the murders broke, Assmann cut his hair completely off. Why would a man shave his head immediately after a crime involving a blonde suspect? Assmann was interrogated, but he had an alibi. He claimed to have been with a woman that night. The police, perhaps wary of causing a diplomatic incident or simply incompetent, let him go. But Assmann seemed to enjoy the notoriety. Over the years, he dropped cryptic hints. On his deathbed, he reportedly told a detective, "One thing I can tell you right away. I was there." But he never explicitly confessed to the act of killing. Assmann has also been linked to other unsolved murders in Finland, including the famous Kiosk case, making him a candidate for a serial killer operating with impunity. Decades passed. The Lake Bodom Murders became a cold case, a legend told around campfires to scare children. The tent was stored away in a police archive, the bloodstains turning brown and brittle. The survivors and the families of the victims grew old. Nils Gustafsson, the sole survivor, rebuilt his life. He married, had children, and worked as a bus driver. He lived a quiet life, forever shadowed by the tragedy, but generally viewed with sympathy as the boy who got away. Then came the year 2004, 44 years after the massacre. Technology had evolved in ways the investigators of 1960 could never have imagined. DNA profiling had become the gold standard of forensics. The Finnish National Bureau of Investigation, the KRP, decided to take one last look at the evidence. They pulled the tent out of storage. They analyzed the blood patterns with modern lasers and chemical reagents. They tested the shoes found in the woods. And they came to a shocking conclusion. In March 2004, the police arrested Nils Gustafsson. The accusation sent shockwaves through Finland. The survivor was now the suspect. The police theory was a narrative of jealousy and rage. They posited that on that night in 1960, an argument had broken out. Perhaps Nils was jealous of Seppo. Perhaps Maila had rejected his advances. The police theorized that Nils was drunk, that he snapped, and that he was thrown out of the tent. Enraged, he allegedly cut the ropes, trapping his friends, and then unleashed his fury. The prosecution's case rested heavily on the new forensic analysis. They claimed that the blood on Nils's shoes belonged to the 3 victims, but there was no blood on the shoes from Nils himself. This, they argued, proved that he was wearing the shoes while he kicked and stomped on his friends, and then took them off and hid them to stage the scene. They also pointed to the overkill on Maila, his girlfriend, suggesting a crime of passion rather than a random attack. They argued that his injuries were self-inflicted or sustained during a fight with Seppo, but were not severe enough to render him incapacitated for hours. The trial began in August 2005. It was the trial of the century for Finland. Nils Gustafsson, now a gray-haired man in his 60s, stood accused of murdering his childhood friends. The courtroom was packed. The media frenzy was intense. The defense, however, was formidable. They dismantled the prosecution's timeline. They pointed out that Nils had a broken jaw and a severe concussion. Would a man with a fractured skull have the presence of mind to stage a complex crime scene, hide shoes 500 meters away, and then lie down and play dead for hours. They brought in medical experts who testified that Nils's injuries were consistent with being a victim, not an attacker. Furthermore, the defense introduced a crucial piece of DNA evidence. A smear of blood found on a pillowcase inside the tent did not match any of the 4 campers. It belonged to an unknown male. This, they argued, was the genetic signature of the real killer, the Kiosk Man, the German spy, or the unknown fisherman. The defense also highlighted the birdwatcher's testimony. They had seen a man walking away. Nils was found lying on the tent. If Nils was the killer, he would have had to attack them, hide the shoes, return, inflict injuries on himself, and then lie down. The timeline was too tight, the actions too irrational. On October 7, 2005, the court delivered its verdict. Nils Gustafsson was acquitted of all charges. The court found that the evidence was not sufficient to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution had failed to rule out the presence of an outside attacker. The state was ordered to pay Nils Gustafsson over 44,000 euros for the suffering caused by his time in custody. So, where does that leave us? Nils Gustafsson walked free, legally innocent. But the court of public opinion remains divided. Some see him as a victim twice over, first by the killer, and then by the legal system. Others look at the blood evidence and the missing time, and they wonder. The case of the Lake Bodom Murders remains officially unsolved. The killer, whoever he was, likely took his secret to the grave. Was it Valdemar Gillström, the man who hated campers and drowned in the very lake that swallowed their lives? Was it Hans Assmann, the spy with the stained clothes and the surgeon's precision? Or was it a stranger, a drifter passing through the Nordic twilight, leaving destruction in his wake? Today, Lake Bodom is still beautiful. People still camp there. The trees still sway in the wind. But if you walk to that small cape, if you stand where the tent once stood, you can feel the weight of the past. It is a place where time stopped in 1960. It is a monument to 3 young lives cut short and a mystery that refuses to die. Forensic science has advanced, but it cannot interrogate the dead. It cannot recover memories lost to trauma. It can only tell us the what, not the who or the why. The tent, the shoes, the knife wounds. They are puzzle pieces that do not fit together, scattered by the clumsy hands of 1960s police and the passage of time. This case forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that sometimes justice is never served. Sometimes the bad man gets away. And sometimes the person sleeping next to you might be the only one who knows the truth. This has been a deep dive into the darkness of the Finnish summer. We have walked the shoreline, examined the evidence, and looked into the eyes of the suspects. But the final judgment belongs to you. Do you believe the modern forensic analysis that pointed the finger at the survivor? Or do you believe the phantom of the Kiosk Man still haunts those woods? Was it a crime of passion? Or the work of a serial predator? I want to hear your theories. This case is a labyrinth, and perhaps one of you holds the thread that leads to the center. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this investigation compelling, if you want to support deep dive, long-form, true crime content that refuses to skim the surface, please make sure you are subscribed to DCF Investigations. Share this story, because the victims of Lake Bodom deserve to be remembered, and the truth, no matter how deeply buried, deserves to be sought. Until next time, stay safe, stay observant, and never ignore the shadows.